Okay, so it's happening. Welcome to the Whispers in the Static, people. I'm your host, Late Night RJ, Dan, and tonight we're diving into the shadows. So, in this podcast, it won't be just a podcast. It will be like a journey into the unknown, and I'm gonna be your ride or die. I'm gonna take you to a place where the lines between reality and the nightmare blurs. So, the stories you're about to hear, they are not going to be just tales because they're going to be real life experiences, right? I'll kid you not, because some of the stories that I was listening to, they were insane and they really meant to give me some chills too. So they're very real and they're based in paranormal, and some of them are really dabbling with the stuff, with the occult, the darkest corners of the human psyche. But all of them will leave you questioning what's real, what's happening, and what's waiting for you in the dark. So let's turn off those lights, put on those headphones, and without further ado, let's begin. Our very first story, the guy who shared the story, his name is Daniel. He's a software engineer. He's in his late 30s, living alone in a small apartment in Chicago. He was a rational guy, logical, analytical, the kind of person who didn't believe in ghosts or demons, but all of them suddenly changed one night while he was working. He was in his chair using his TV turned on by itself, and it wasn't quite natural for his smart devices to act up, though they were faulty, but this time it felt different. The screen was filled with static, the old school white noise you'd see on a dead channel. He grabbed the remote, but it didn't respond. The TV stayed on, the static growing louder, more intentional, and then he saw it, the static. It wasn't just random anymore, it was forming shapes, vague, indistinct at first, but slowly resolving into something horrifying. A man was turning into a face of a man, twisted, distorted, staring at him. And Daniel found himself froze. He couldn't move. He told himself it was just his tired mind playing tricks, but then the face spoke. "I can see you." The face was garbled, like it was coming through a broken window, but the words, they were very clear. Daniel stumbled back, knocking over his chair. He yanked the power cord from the wall and the TV went dark. But the room, it didn't feel empty. He could still hear the static faint, but very persistent, like it was coming from inside his head. And this is where the craziest thing happens, right? So Daniel was kind of in the middle of a limbo. He was stuck. He was not even sure what was happening. Was it all in his head? He was hallucinating, but then again, he wasn't taking on any meds to hallucinate in the first place, right? The next few days for Daniel, it was all a blur. He tried to convince himself, could be sleep deprivation, could be because of stress, but it wasn't, because it was happening again. And this time, that loud static noise, it was coming from the kitchen. While he was making coffee when the static returned, it also came from the TV too. So it was coming from various directions. Well, so you picture yourself, you're working, you're in the middle of your work, and suddenly one noise, a very familiar distant noise, comes from one side of the room or the corner, and suddenly every single thing starts to mimic that same fucking sound. How creepy and how fucking weird is that? So Daniel threw his phone across the room, only to hoping that the voice would not follow him, but it was there, in the walls, in the air, in his dreams, and now he started seeing the face every fucking where, even in the reflections, in the shadows. I don't know, man. I kid you not. This is disturbing when you try to actually. What would you do in that particular scenario? It's a battle within the mind. It's a battle of control. What's real and what's in the head. So we're gonna move on to the continuation of the stories. What Daniel did after that, because he realized that this was taking a toll on him. He was losing his job, and most importantly, he was losing himself, his sanity. He decided that he would move out the next day. He left every single thing behind, his TV, his phone, even his laptop, and all of this just to hope that he would never ever see that thing again. But he says that the static never really went away. Sometimes late at night, he still sees and hears the static noise, and the face, it still watches him. Right, so oh man, that was something. I want to say something. What makes this story so unsettling isn't just the idea of a malevolent entity, right? It's something, it's like, of course, it's terrifying, an entity using technology to reach into our world, but what's even scarier that it very much preys on that one thing that keeps us sane. It's the sense of safety, his home, right? Think about it, his home, his devices, even his own mind, they all are turned against him. Now, what can a man do? What can a man do when his whole life, his whole reality falls apart, right? And I'm sure that's a fear we all can relate to. The fear of losing control. All right, people, coming back. So our next story takes us to the small town of Black Hollow. In 1987, a 17-year-old girl named Emily Carter vanished without a trace. She was last seen walking home from a friend's house. Now, here's what happened. Her parents reported that Emily went missing the next morning, and the entire town searched for her, but there were no sign, no footprints, no torn clothing, nothing, not a single trace of Emily. So people came into a conclusion that she might have run away. They assumed that mostly because Emily was a white girl. She was a bit of a loner too, and her home life, let's just say, wasn't quite really perfect. But she had a best friend. Her name was Sarah, and she knew that something was definitely wrong. Emily wouldn't just disappear, and Emily was the kind of person who would stay through and thin for her family, her friends, and her life. And so the day after Emily's vanishing, Sarah started having some weird nightmares. She said that she was dreaming of Emily, and she would always see her standing in front of the woods. The craziest thing, she wasn't herself. They were absolutely hollow, dark void inside of her eyes. Her mouth would move silently as if she was staring at a ghost, as a shinigami. In the dreams, Emily was trying to tell her something, but she could never really hear those words. And so one night, Sarah woke up to find muddy footprints on her bedroom floor, and they were leading her to the window next to her. It was small and delicate, just like Emily's. Sarah, realizing that what was happening to her wasn't normal, she moved away shortly after that. But the townspeople say they still see Emily in the woods. She's always there, standing and watching. The thing about this story, what I found this really enticing, it's the fact that it's not just haunting, and it's not just because of the disappearance, right? But because of what Emily represents. What do you think? Do you think she's a ghost trapped in the place where she died? Or is she something else? A manifestation of the town's guilt, its collective fear of the unknown. And even if so, what about Sarah's nightmares? Were they a psychic connection to Emily? Or just the mind's way of processing trauma? And so that was the second story. Moving on to the third, it's a unique one. It's called The Red Room. Our final story tonight is one you've heard of, The Red Room. It's a dark web legend. It's a supposed site to where you can watch live torture and murder. Most people think that it's a myth, but one user on 4chan claimed they found it. So basically, the guy who calls them some shadow seeker said the site was hidden behind layers of encryption, right? And once they got in, they were greeted with a live stream of a dimly lit room. In the center was a chair and a person tied up and gagged. Shadow Seeker tried to report the site, but before they could, the stream changed. The camera panned to reveal them sitting in their own room The person on the stream was them. And the last thing they saw before shutting their laptop was a message on the screen saying, "You are next." This thing can be very real though, right? I don't want to get into it, but just imagine the fact that the Red Room is a modern day boogeyman, and it's a reflection of our deepest fears about the internet. It's a place where anonymity breeds cruelty, where the line between observer and participant blurs. But what if it's more than that? What if it's a gateway to something so much darker? Now, I know things got a little bit dark, but I just want to deep dive, and I just want to take a moment to breathe in, right? I don't know about you, but after those stories, I'm feeling unsettled, right? And that's the point, isn't it? Like I said, horror isn't just about scaring us. It's about making us feel something. Fear, yes, but also cruelty, empathy, even sadness. So let's dive into these stories and unpack what makes them so deeply terrifying. I want to start with this static man once again. So this one got really under my skin in a way I wasn't quite expecting. I mean, think about it. Technology is supposed to be our safe space, right? It's how we connect, how we work, how we escape. But what if that line is blurred and it's not really a safe place anymore? What if it's a doorway what if it was a doorway for something else? Because the idea of the static man, to me, isn't just about a ghost in the machine. It's not just about losing control. Daniel's story is a nightmare because it takes something familiar. It's something that is very close to you. For example, for him, Daniel was a loner. He was a software engineer. For a guy like him, the most deepest and the most comforting thing would be his phone, his TV, his computer, his home. And when something external twists it into something unrecognizable, man, I don't know the level of violation that creates, because that's privacy, man. That's the ultimate violation of privacy. That's exactly what makes it so psychologically terrifying. We've built this digital world, didn't we? But we don't really understand it, and the lack of understanding is where the fear creeps in. What if there's something in the static, something that's been there all along, watching, waiting? There's the emotional tone, right? Because Daniel wasn't just scared, he was broken, man. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped trusting his own mind, and that's the horror of the static man. It's not the entity, my friend. It's not about that. It's about what it does to you. It takes your sense of safety, your sense of self, until you don't even recognize yourself anymore. I'll tell you what, the Emily Carter story, that hits on a different level. It's not a ghost story. It's about loss. It's about grieving someone that's close to you. They're mean to you. And it's about how the way they leave those things behind. So, like the disappearance of Emily, it's heartbreaking. She was a kid, man, and she had her whole life ahead of her. And then suddenly she was gone. Sarah started having nightmares, the footprints, the feeling that Emily was trying to reach out to her, right? It's exactly that. There's where the emotional impact happens. Do you believe that it's what grief does to us? To human psyche, human mind, it can make us see things that aren't there, what I mean. And it can also make you hear voices that don't really exist. Maybe there's a part of me that believes in this theory that Emily was inside of a parallel universe. She was going through the woods, right? And when she was doing that, unwittingly, she might have gone in through a portal to a different dimension, and she was all along trying to communicate. But just think of the idea. What if she was trapped inside a limbo? And she still is, unable to move on. What do you think of that? And those townspeople, right? They say that, look, I can back you up with it, okay? They still see her standing over there, watching. She might be a manifestation of the town's collective guilt. Maybe they feel responsible for her disappearance, or Emily's presence is a reminder of some sort. I'm gonna leave this one to you guys. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your theories. I'd love to know. So one thing I would like to conclude about the Emily story, the physical evidence, it's there, it's tangible, and it's real. If Emily's ghost is real, imagine what else is out there. What other horrors are lurking in the shadows? The Red Room is about the deepest fears about the internet. It's a dark web, definitely. It's a place where anonymity breeds cruelty, where the line between observer and participant is blurred. Now, theoretically speaking, on a psychological perspective, actually it's not psychological, it's parapsychological. Now, there's a reflection about this, okay? There's a saying that the dark web, the deepest dark web, is actually a reflection of our own psyche, of our own darkness, and we all have a red room inside of us. It's a place where our darkest thoughts and desires reside, and sometimes those thoughts escape. What makes the red room one of the stories that I picked from Reddit is that it's always there. It's just beneath the surface. You don't have to go looking for it. It finds you, and once it does, there's no escaping. It's like the internet itself is hunting you, feeding on your fear, your curiosity, your guilt. So imagine the Red Room isn't just a dark web legend. It's a metaphor for the darkest aspects of our mind. We all have the capacity for cruelty, right? For violence, for evil. And sometimes the darkness spills over into the real world. So what can we take from all of this? Let's take this moment to see the stories. They resonate with us so deeply. It's because they tap into our deepest fears. It's the unknown. It's the fear of losing control. It's the darkness within ourselves. They are here to remind us that the world is full of mysteries. Some beautiful, some terrifying. And it's just about us, how we cherish that, how we nurture that, and what part of us we try to fit into. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we keep coming back for more. That's the part of it, people. Until next time, this is Thriller Night. This is your RJ, Din, and I want you to stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, the shadows are always watching. This is me, your ride or die, signing out, hoping to meet in the very next episode. Good night.